Hey everybody, welcome to Warrior DNA. My name is Larry Wallace and this is Staci Wallace.
Warrior DNA is where we are raising up warriors, leaders who have the DNA of God's character, while also being successful in the marketplace. We're talking about a new book that we're reading called The End of Average. We're talking about the enemy of average. What is it and how do you escape it? Pretty cool stories we're going to be sharing with you today and how you can actually go to the next level. Why be average when you can be extraordinary? Larry, when we started reading this book, it got us right in the introduction because it told this amazing story about aviation and what averages almost did. It actually cost a lot of lives in the area of aviation.
Yeah, back in the early days in the 1940s, there were a lot of accidents. It was just the dawn of the jet age where they were starting to use more powerful airplanes, engines, and even started getting into jets. And it really hit close to home because my grandfather flew in World War II. He was an aviator, he was a pilot, and actually he was an ace in World War II. And he used to tell me lots of stories growing up. And so whenever we read that in the very
You
intro...
wanted to be an airplane pilot, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So, because I loved my grandfather and he was like an idol to me.
You're a little bit big.
Yes, as you can see.
He outgrew them there cockpits.
Yeah, so that was like my original goal when I was young, was I wanted to become a pilot. And obviously I outgrew the cockpit. So there's planes that I could fit in, but I really didn't want to be, you know, a pilot of one of the larger planes. I wanted to be a fighter pilot like my grandfather was.
Well, what this book actually says in the introduction, it talks about how many times we try to fit in to what society or systems call average or normal, and how crazy it is when we do that, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to fit into somebody else's life.
Right.
We're actually taking somebody else's life and trying to apply it to ours, as opposed to don't be conformed to the patterns or systems of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, it's interesting, there were some scientists that got together and they were trying to figure out what is happening. Why, in fact, one day, 17 pilots went down. And so they thought, well, maybe it's pilot error, maybe it's the airplane.
Yeah, originally they were saying it was pilot error because they would blame everything on the pilots because the technology that they were using inside the planes was very advanced at the time. And so the engineers, the maker of the airplanes, they didn't want to blame it on the planes. They wanted to blame it on the pilot because, you know, human error. And
everybody was pointing fingers.
Everybody was pointing fingers. And so there happened to be a scientist, a doctor, who was actually a lieutenant in the Air Force, who did a bunch of studies. And so at that time, the way they built the airplanes was built off of what they considered the average pilot. And the average pilot turned out to be not so average.
In fact, it turned out to be impossible.
Right.
So what they did, they took over 4,000 pilots and they studied them. They studied their hand sizes, their body frame sizes, their head sizes, their shoulder sizes.
Even the dimensions from the eye to the ear. I mean, crazy. They did everything.
They studied everything and they came up with this perfect average, thinking this is the way we're going to create our cockpits, and then we'll make sure that we'll decrease the number of deaths. The problem is that average person that they created with those numbers didn't exist. They tested over 4,000 pilots and not one of them, zero, actually fit into that average, which meant that whole form of science of creating averages is actually trying to put a whole world or sea of people on you instead of being individual and being extraordinary in yourself. When they began to realize they needed customization of those cockpits, that's when the deaths began to decrease. So they began to look at individual pilots and what does the cockpit need to look like. Reminds me a lot of athletic shoes. You know, growing up, when I was playing basketball, you were playing football. I mean, an 8 was an 8.
Right.
That's what size shoe I wore. And then I'd be like, well, I have AAA narrow feet. And they're like, oh, well, we've got 8 narrow. And that's about as deep as it went.
I remember too, like when I played football, you had one shoe manufacturer and one type of shoe, and everybody wore the same type of shoe regardless of what You know, obviously the sizes differed, but the way the mold was for the inside of the shoe never changed. It was the exact same for every player.
I'll never forget when I was doing a lot of basketball playing, and so my brother bought me a new pair of shoes, and he was running, he was doing marathons, and he says, you need to have customized shoes. And I'm like, well, that sounds expensive. Well, now today, customized shoes is what most people, I think about Denise right now. She's gone through how many pairs of average shoes trying to find the perfect average shoe to fit her feet. But she's got specific arch, she's got specific running style, walking style, weight. And when you begin to look at trying to put yourself into someone else's average, it really forces you to conform to almost good.
I remember whenever I was growing up, I used to hate going to the shoe store because I had a big foot, 13 guys. So I had a big foot, and so there wasn't a whole lot of shoes in my size range, and I would have to go and just try on shoe after shoe after shoe after shoe, and honestly, it got tiring. And I didn't like it, but here's what it felt like. It felt like these shoe manufacturers were just taking like a big old wad of spaghetti and just throwing up against the wall and seeing what would stick.
Today, it's different. Today we know whether it's aviation, athletic shoes, or even your life, is average is not good enough. God created you with a very, very specific fingerprint, thumbprint, life print that only you are going to be able to fulfill. Song I wrote called Cinderella Dream Come True talks about how all these other people tried to fit into Cinderella's shoe, but unfortunately they were made just for her. There's a plan and a purpose, a life. Your Creator created you unique. There's not another person on the planet that's just like you. So when you scroll through Instagram or Facebook and you try to fit into average, or you compare yourself to someone else's best, you're shortcutting what God, your Creator, has created you to do. I want to read you something out of this book real quick. This is just one paragraph that I think sums it up. Clearly the donkey had something to say about it.
Donkey's hungry.
Okay. From the cradle to the grave, you are measured against the ever-present yardstick of the average, judged according to how closely you approximate it or how far you are able to exceed it. In school, you're graded and ranked by comparing your performance to the average student. To get into college, your grades and test scores are compared to the average applicant. To get hired by an employer, your grades and test scores, as well as your skills, years of experience, and even your personality score are compared to the average applicant. If you do get hired, your annual review will quite likely be comparing you yet again against the average employee in your job level. Even your financial opportunities are determined by a credit score that is evaluated by, you guessed it, the averages.
Don't be average. I think that's what the theme of this whole video today is. Don't be average, because you're not supposed to be average. We've never taught our kids to be average. We told our kids, be set apart, be different. And I think that's one of the things that we've conditioned ourselves over the years to be average.
Well, we believe that God has a plan for your life. Jeremiah 1:5 says, before God formed you in your mother's womb, He knew you. Before you were born, He set you apart as different so that you could become a spokesperson to the people that are around you. If you're trying to blend in, you'll never stand out. So when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, am I being average? Am I trying to be like everyone else? Or am I being my best? Am I being who God created me to be? Are you building a life that you love? Or are you trying to fit into college standards and work standards and student standards and financial standards? When Larry and I stepped out into this crazy adventurous life, we decided that we no longer wanted to blend into what everybody expected of us. We wanted to be able to live a life by design by what God was creating us to be, our unique talents and giftings. We wanted to give back to humanity in a way that God could uniquely use our talents and giftings. Well, we want that same thing for you, that you stand out. Find out every day, maybe wake up and say, am I being my best in the area of faith? Are you... The donkey wants you to know that is very important. Are you doing what you can do to spend time with God? Faith. Family. Are you spending quality time with your family? Or are you just trying to be average? Fitness. If I were to ask you, if we were to coach you and we were to say, are you giving your best? Are you being the best version of you that you could possibly be? You will know that. Faith, family, finance, fitness, and freedom. All of these areas, ask yourself today, are you giving your best? If not, step it up.
You know, there was a great quote in that book. It says, don't fit yourself into the system. Make this system fit you.
I love that. That means that do you, and do you really good. Make the changes you need to make, but don't be scrolling and let the comparison-itis steal your joy. Be who God's created you to be today. We love you guys. This is Warrior DNA, helping you have the warrior-like spirit and the DNA of God's character.
Hey, if you like this video, do us a huge favor. If you haven't already, subscribe. Hit the subscribe button below, and right next to it is the bell. Click on the bell, and each time that we upload a new video, you'll get a notification. And please, as always, leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you thought about this particular video, or just stop and say hi. We respond to every one of our comments because we love to hear from you guys.
I was doing signs, not sign language, but I was like, talk, bell.
I think she can make a dance out of that.
Oh yeah, we could do that. We love you guys. Have a great week. Thank you for watching Warrior DNA.
Bye, everybody.